Hi, this is Jeff Bliss, and welcome to the Capital Forum's interview series. Today I have with me again, for another year, Seth Bloom, president of Bloom Strategic Council. Seth, it's a pleasure to have you again to talk to.
Well, thank you very much. I always enjoy it.
Yeah, same here. Well, talk to me about, I would say, the changed regulatory landscape in terms of antitrust over the past year. We've seen a lot of changes. Why don't you tell me the highlights and lowlights?
We could spend all our time talking about that. A lot of changes. You know, with the Trump administration coming in, there was sort of high expectations when at the start of the administration with then Assistant Attorney General Gail Slater, who no longer has that position, and Chairman of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson. They both made very strong statements of how tough enforcers they were going to be.
I would remind him at a conference we sponsored last year around this time.
That's correct.
Yes.
And so I would say at the beginning of March of last year, I said, you know, there's not, some of it sounds a lot like the Biden administration, which of course was very tough antitrust enforcers. I said, if you thought the Biden administration was a 10 in antitrust enforcement and like the George W. Bush administration was a 2 or 3, this administration is going to be a 7 or an 8, given what they said. Well, I sort of have to revise those comments today because we've seen a real lessening of antitrust enforcement and a politicization of antitrust enforcement in a way I don't think anybody could have really anticipated. And, you know, the White House, including the president himself, being very much involved in antitrust enforcement, cases being dropped, such as the HP Juniper case, such as the Compass Anywhere merger investigation, which was sort of terminated.
Didn't even get a second
request. The rise of influential lobbyists like Mike Davis, who have a remarkable record of success, as they would see it, but are really influential. And the fact that antitrust is no longer, especially at the Justice Department, decisions on big cases are no longer made just at the antitrust division, but the Attorney General gets involved, deputies to the Attorney General get involved. More than get involved, they direct the enforcement, and the White House gets involved and sometimes directs the enforcement. These are very radical changes in the way antitrust has been done in this country for decades. And at the FTC, Andrew Ferguson is a loyal member of the Trump administration as he would see it. You know, traditionally, the FTC was thought of as an independent agency. No more. He considers it to be an executive branch agency. He very much follows the direction of the White House. Of course, we saw the 2 Democratic commissioners get removed.
Yeah, Slaughter and Bedoya.
So we don't have really a bipartisan commission anymore. We don't have an independent FTC anymore. Those are all very radical changes in antitrust enforcement. So as I say, we could talk for a long time about it, but that's my general comments.
Well, I'll talk about it in terms of you being an advocate. I mean, you've been on the Hill, you've done a lot of different things in your career. How has advocacy for, we can talk about mergers as well as conduct cases, changed, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think advocacy is the same. And, you know, I'm not Mike Davis. I don't have these really close ties to the White House. So I go about doing it the way I've always doing it. And you know, talking to the staff at the Justice Department or talking to the staff at the FTC. Also, because I do a lot of lobbying on Capitol Hill, talking to members of Congress and their staffs. It hasn't really changed for me, but I think as a matter of advocacy, it's important to get folks that are close to the White House these days. Although not, you know, having said that, not all cases are like that. The cases that don't generate the maximum publicity, I think advocacy is sort of the same. You know, how many mergers, how many antitrust investigations, hundreds, thousands. The top political echelons can't be involved in everything. So for the more run-of-the-mill type of transactions, I think the advocacy is the same and the decision makers are the same. It's the really high-profile cases, you know, like the Live Nation case or the HP Juniper. Those are the ones that have really political involvement.
We'll talk a little bit. You talked earlier about, I mean, what it sounds like to me is like the usual decision makers, like the antitrust division head,
right,
Ferguson. They've been, and his fellow commissioners. That's not really how it works, especially on the highly politicized, high-profile cases. We talk a little bit about Gail Slater,
Yeah.
kind of the troubles she had,
Yes.
and then her eventual ouster. How
Right.
did that? Maybe talk a little bit about that and how that has maybe changed some of this landscape we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Well, again, I was very impressed with Gail Slater when she came in and the things that she was saying. And she seemed to be a genuine tough enforcer and wanted to call it like she saw it. And she talked about America First antitrust, but that was what she called it. But it was, strong antitrust enforcement. What happened with her is that she disagreed. Well, she wanted to bring cases or not settle cases, and she disagreed with the interference she was getting from her higher ups at the Attorney General's office or in the White House. And there were a couple prominent examples of that. The HP Juniper merger case, the settlement of that case originally brought in the first days of the Trump administration, but by July or August, it was settled in what most people thought was a very favorable settlement. And by all reporting, she and her top deputies opposed the settlement.
Yeah.
Well, it was really Mike Davis cut a deal with the top echelons of DOJ, as the Wall Street Journal last week did an excellent story on this and how that happened. Believing what the Wall Street Journal said, if you believe that,
and we've also done our own coverage.
And you always do excellent coverage.
Well,
so.
as an organization, we've done some, I think,
Right.
some good stories that really,
Right.
I would say, certainly had similar conclusions that the
Right.
Journal story had.
So, her and her top deputies disagreed with that, and as a result, those two top deputies, Roger Alford and Bill Renner, were fired, and her job survived, but she was clearly weakened after that. And then the Compass Anywhere case, which are the number one and number two real estate brokerages, they didn't even do a second request, and by reports she disagreed with that. Well, eventually, her position became untenable, and she lost her job because she was just disagreeing with the way that the top echelons of the DOJ were directing her to do on these prominent cases. So it was really remarkable. It remains to be seen what's going to happen now. Her successor, has made some very strong statements about how they're going to continue to be tough on antitrust. We'll see. The Live Nation settlement surprised a lot of people. That was after Gail Slater left. And according to the Wall Street Journal, and I don't know about your reporting, but it was directed by the president to do that.
Yeah,
Is that your reporting as well?
Well, I mean, we
Right.
don't have anything to
Okay.
confirm that, but it certainly was. He has stepped in very publicly in other ways.
Now,
So.
the surprising thing about that, and President Trump made a directive, an executive order about 6 months ago, saying take action about high ticketing fees.
Right.
Nonetheless, reached this settlement. Also, one of the hallmarks of what Gail Slater at one point called America First Antitrust was to care about issues that affect the ordinary consumer, the man or woman on the street. So, high gas prices or high food prices, high price of drugs.
Affordability.
Affordability.
The word that
Ticketing
Trump has had trouble
costs.
with. Yeah, absolutely.
So to see him eager to settle that case was a surprise. We'll see how it goes from here.
But that's a good segue into something else I wanted to talk to you. You know the Hill well, you know politics well. You have the midterms coming up.
Yes.
Every article I read about the midterms, I don't cover politics on the Hill
Yeah.
as closely anymore. Affordability is going to be an issue. That's what
Absolutely.
people care about. How do you think things are going to go for the Democrats? And if there is a change in power and all the rest, what happens to antitrust enforcement?
Okay. I'll make a
post-election?
bold prediction. This is March 26th for people watching it. I think the Democrats are going to pick up the House. Maybe that's not so bold because pretty much everything. And I think there's at least a 50-50 chance they pick up the Senate
Really?
as well. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So, assuming that there's a change in control of Congress, what does that mean for antitrust enforcement? The president will still be in power. The antitrust division and the FTC will be run by the same people, presumably.
All right.
So change in control of Congress probably won't be make that much of a difference. On the other hand, there'll be the possibility of oversight hearings. And, I'm sure there's going to be an oversight hearing about what happened with these settlements and allegations of corruption that Roger Alford made. And people will be called in. So I think that kind of thing may constrain a little bit of the politicization of antitrust enforcement. But still, for another 2 years after the election, the Trump administration is going to be in charge. So I don't think we're going to see great changes. Now, the affordability in the administration's views on antitrust, the affordability issue is a key issue. And I think one might expect them to be cognizant of that. The Live Nation settlement is not proof of that, but one might expect them to be cognizant of that in other industries, that they just can't walk away from antitrust enforcement because it affects affordability and people care about it.
All right, I'd like to ask you one more question. Yeah. Okay, so basically we have more oversight hearings. Yeah. What about legislation?
Yeah, I think if the Democrats get control, there'll be a lot more legislation. I mean, we basically see no action on legislation this Congress and a Republican-controlled House and Senate. But, several years ago, there were major legislative efforts. Senator Klobuchar had her ACOA bill. About 6 bills passed the House Judiciary Committee. With a couple of exceptions, none of them were enacted into law. But I think these people are going to come back. Now, Senator Klobuchar likely will no longer be in Congress because she's running for governor of Minnesota and likely to win that race. But other people will pick up. But she just introduced a bill to increase oversight of settlements in antitrust cases. But I think we'll see a lot more legislation in the next Congress. I think the House Judiciary Committee in particular will be enthusiastic about such legislation.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
The story with legislation is not this year, but it's wait for next year, I think.
Very good. Well, Seth, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much and sharing your thoughts on what is a very, very important year, I think, in antitrust.
I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.